Good morning. I'm Jaden Braves. I'm the CEO and founder of the Young Politicians of Canada, and I'm pleased to be here today. It's a privilege to be on the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and we thank all that dedicate their time to preserving it and stewarding it for us to work and live on. It is an absolute honor to be here today presenting the National Youth Roundtable on Legislation's report, a report that works on the future of Canada, the future for youth, and a future that every young person in this country deserves to grow up in and live in. It was only a year ago that we announced this roundtable, with support from MPs with each party, ensuring that every representative knows that young people have to be at the table and have to be heard, seen, and represented within Parliament. Having this come to fruition means thousands of young Canadians with their voices directly represented in Parliament. Politicians have failed to take responsibility for the future. That's why we're here. The report thoroughly highlights challenges facing youth in Canada and the solutions to what lies ahead. Hear our voices, hear us now is more than just a plea for help. It is a demand from thousands of youth unanimously agreeing action needs to be taken. Certain leadership in Canada have folded towards polarizing rhetoric we see south of the border. Canadian values uplift one another and strive to find the best of both arguments in the strongest solution, because that's what it means to be Canadian. These times are tumultuous, to say the least. Donald Trump creates Liberation Day, a make-believe holiday, to decipher how much we will fuck over the longest standing friends, including NATO partners and Canada, in spite of his own citizens. Look youth in the eye. A series of backpedaling has driven young Canadians across the country to do your jobs in critically analyzing what needs to be done now. Unfinished business like online legislation, laws surrounding artificial intelligence, and youth climate corps have not been delivered. Many policymakers assume that because climate change is no longer discussed widely, the crisis has ended. In reality, CO2 levels in the atmosphere are the highest they've ever been in human history. Clean water? In Canada? Apparently not. Boiled water advisories still plague Indigenous communities decades after promises to fix them. What is going on? These are only a few of the key points made in this report that needs to be implemented right now and for the future. The methods at which we address problems in 2025 must be pivoted in order to meet the needs of evolving technology and nuance in the world. We are here to ensure Canada deserves youth. I'm glad to be standing beside the strongest representation of young Canadian leadership, and I'm pleased to pass it to the chair of the National Youth Roundtable on Legislation and my dear colleague, Cabria Leaks-Kotick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cabria Leaks-Kotick, and firstly, I'd like to thank the Young Politicians of Canada for entrusting me with the role and responsibilities of the chair of the National Youth Roundtable on Legislation. Right now in Canada, 850,000 youth are not in employment, education, or training. The youth unemployment rate has now reached an all-time high of 14.4% in December of 2024. This according to Statistics Canada. With unemployment rising by 1.1 percentage points to 13.9% in November of 2024, a one-month difference. This marking the largest year-over-year increase among major age groups, more than double the national average. We look to our racialized youth facing even greater barriers. Young Black youth are experiencing an unemployment rate of 24.4%. This compared to only 14% of non-racialized youth. These are not just statistics, this is a crisis. And young people are at the helm. Young workers are finding themselves trapped in precarious, low-wage jobs, making financial independence an impossible goal. If youth are struggling economically, Canada is struggling economically. Our recommendations to address this look to the need for access and reduction of financial barriers to education. We need to ensure financial aid reflects the true cost of education, and increasing federal and provincial funding for the needs-based grants is essential. But education alone is not going to fix this. It's not enough. We also need to build stronger pathways between education and employment. Internships, co-op programs, and apprenticeship opportunities must be expanded, ensuring that young people aren't just filling jobs, but also building long-term careers. This isn't just about youth, it's about Canada's future, our economic growth, and our stability. Our recommendations also cover the creation of a federal youth entrepreneurship fund to provide startup grants, mentorship, and business development training, with a particular focus on supporting racialized, low-income, and other marginalized youth. By fostering innovation and self-sufficiency, this initiative can create new opportunities for employment and opportunities that will reduce the reliance on precarious work. We have the opportunity to act now, to work together as partners, and to ensure that this generation and the next is able to be supported and to succeed. I will now pass this off to our roundtable member, Selena.
Hello, I'm Selena Mankarios, an environmental justice and human rights researcher, nonprofit founder, and social entrepreneur. Right now, youth are seeking the implementation of an intersectional social impact education and the transition of animal agriculture to plant-based alternatives. Youth across Canada face a major gap in our education system. Despite being directly impacted by global crises like climate change and inequality, we lack the tools, knowledge, or support to engage meaningfully. Many juggle school, work, and personal responsibilities, leading to burnout and untapped potential. Faced with a lack of education on global issues, difficulty empathizing with unfamiliar lived experiences, and believing their actions won't make a big enough difference, we're recommending the implementation of Etheria, a youth-founded, innovative platform that brings interactive social impact education into schools. Etheria empowers students to improve their lives with 6 personal development themes such as mental health, financial literacy, and healthy relationships, and to sustainably tackle world issues with 9 world issue themes such as climate change, animal welfare, disability rights, and poverty. It uses AI, AR, and gamified learning, as well as psychology, and content and features co-created with Ivy League professors, UN diplomats, psychologists, and 180 of the biggest award-winning youth activists from over 80 countries. It's a one-stop hub for impact, where youth can participate in sustainable impact missions, measure their real-life impact, explore resources, shop through theme-related Canadian small businesses, learn from AR worlds, participate in events and team challenges for prizes, and more. With pilot programs being launched in 5 countries, we ask Canada's Ministries of Education to partner with Etheria to tailor and implement it nationally. We are also recommending the transition of animal agriculture to plant-based alternatives. This industry is the 2nd largest emitter of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet it remains overlooked in our climate policies. At the same time, billions in tax-funded subsidies continue to support meat and dairy, incentivizing environmental destruction, while plant-based alternatives remain unaffordable for many. We call on Parliament to reallocate a portion of these subsidies toward plant-based alternatives, implement a gradual tax on high-impact animal products, support farmers in the transition toward other alternatives, and show big agricultural industries other alternatives as well. We call on Parliament to incorporate plant-based education and school meals through Etheria and other partners to teach youth how their food choices impact the planet, health, and social equity. These 2 recommendations would help Canada with reaching 13 of the 17 SDGs, support the economy through small business growth, and position Canada as a global leader in education innovation. Empower youth and let us help position Canada as the forward-thinking and innovative country that Canada is. And now I'd like to pass it off to my colleague, Anika.
Hello, my name is Anika Griffin. I am a 17-year-old high school student from the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve. Right now, youth across Canada continue to face 2 crises. Many of you may know this as the clean water crisis on reserves and the climate crisis. But what is lost on many is that Indigenous issues are our collective issues as Canadians. The clean water crisis on Indigenous reserves has been a pressing issue for decades and is in dire need of attention. It was pledged by the Liberal government in 2015, when I was 7 years old, that all boil water advisories would be lifted in 5 years' time. In 2012, Canada recognized the UN's declaration to clean water as a human right, but 33 Indigenous communities are still under a boil water advisory, like the Neskonska First Nation, a community in northern Ontario situated along the Attawapiskat Lake near Kenora, who has been under a boil water advisory for 30 years as of February. I am now 17 years old, and that was over 10 years ago. Our human rights are being violated. We have heard time and time again that Indigenous communities already face disparities in education, wealth, mental health, addiction, well-being, and violence against women, girls, and Two-Spirit peoples. Let's ensure every Canadian has their human rights met, and let's start with ensuring proper sanitation and clean water for Indigenous communities. We all remember the smog that filled the skies across Canada, making the air quality so bad we cannot go outside. This is but one side of the climate crisis. Youth are concerned about the long-term impacts of the decision made today in our name. Researchers at Lakehead University found that 78% of Canadian youth have climate anxiety, and the Climate Action Tracker has found that Canada is not on track to meet the Paris Agreement goals. We do not know what our future looks like because we are not the ones shaping it. This makes me think of a teaching known as the 7th generation principle rooted in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It encourages making decisions that benefit not only the present, but the next 7 generations, emphasizing sustainability and long-term thinking. We are rightfully nervous that the adults at the table have failed to think ahead, think of their own children and grandchildren. How could you wish this future on your children, a future where they cannot go outside and breathe the air? Our recommendations to address the climate crisis, including strengthening commitments to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by transitioning to renewable energy, aim to reasonably and effectively encourage positive and tangible progress. By adhering to the 7th generation principle of the Iroquois, when a policy or project is put forward, we urge you to consider not only the youth of today, but the youth of the future. If your policy is not multi-generational, it may not be a good plan. Our recommendations to address the water crisis on reserves encompasses solutions such as infrastructure and maintenance, but to also address and recognize underlying issues. We also seek to empower Indigenous communities to build and manage their own water systems through educating community members in the industries that are needed to accomplish this. We also recommend that companies that engage in mining and fracking are held fully accountable for the financial and environmental impacts and outcomes of their activities on Indigenous communities and Canadians when their projects fail and have a tangible measurement of what that failure looks like. I will now pass the floor to my colleague Lena.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je m'appelle Lina Nadamak. Aujourd'hui, nous nous trouvons à un carrefour critique pour l'avenir des jeunes Canadiens. L'intelligence artificielle transforme rapidement nos vies quotidiennes, nos carrières et même nos perspectives d'avenir. Mais alors que l'innovation progresse, l'incertitude grandit. Nous, les jeunes, nous posons une question fondamentale. Sommes-nous préparés? We stand at the intersection of opportunity and anxiety. Artificial intelligence is not just a tool. It's an agent of transformation. It's redefining how we learn, how we work, and how we engage with the world. Yet, its rapid evolution has left many young Canadians unsure about their place in the workforce of tomorrow. The automation of jobs disproportionately impacts youth, particularly those in entry-level positions and trades. Nearly 42% of the Canadian labor force is at high risk of being affected by automation in the coming decade. While new industries will emerge, there's a glaring gap in our preparedness to navigate these shifts. We cannot afford to wait. Il est impératif d'investir dans l'éducation et la formation en intelligence artificielle. Cela signifie mettre en place des programmes nationaux de requalification et de littératie numérique en intégrant l'IA dans nos cursus éducatifs pour garantir que les jeunes acquièrent les compétences nécessaires. Il est également essentiel d'établir les lignes directrices claires pour l'éthique et l'équité des algorithmes, notamment dans les processus d'embauche, la justice et les soins de santé, où les biais algorithmiques risquent d'exacerber les discriminations systémiques. De plus, la prolifération des deepfakes et la désinformation exige une réponse immédiate. Nous devons renforcer l'éducation en médias numériques et la transparence algorithmique pour protéger notre démocratie et notre accès à une information fiable. But even as we adapt to a world shaped by AI, we must acknowledge another crisis weighing heavily on young Canadians, the housing crisis. The integration of AI in the workforce is meaningless if young people cannot afford a stable place to live. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in major cities has increased by over 20% in the past 2 years, while youth incomes have remained stagnant. For many, home ownership feels like an unattainable dream. How can we plan for the future if we're still struggling to afford the present? C'est pourquoi nous appelons à des réformes urgentes en matière de logement abordable et durable pour les jeunes. La réduction des frais et taxes gouvernementaux sur la construction, l'accélération des réformes de zonage et la priorisation des matériaux de construction locaux sont des mesures essentielles pour rendre le logement plus accessible. Au-delà des statistiques, ce sont nos vies qui sont en enjeu. Derrière chaque chiffre, il y a un jeune qui repousse l'idée de quitter le domicile familial. Un étudiant qui jongle entre les études et des emplois précaires. Un travailleur qui peine à épargner pour l'avenir. The future of AI and the future of housing are not separate issues. They are deeply intertwined. As we embrace the technological advancements, we must ensure that progress does not come at the expense of stability. Investing in AI literacy while tackling the housing crisis will empower young Canadians will empower young Canadians to thrive, not just survive. This is not just about policy. It's about our generation's right to a secure and promising future. Merci beaucoup, et je passe maintenant la parole à ma collègue Savrop.
Hello, my name is Savroop Gaur, and I stand before you today as a passionate advocate for menstrual and reproductive equity, as well as the urgent need for systemic change in how we support young people across Canada. Right now, youth in our communities face mounting challenges: mental health crises, addiction, and rising violence. At the same time, young menstruators and those needing reproductive care continue to encounter systemic barriers that disproportionately impact BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and rural populations. Here's the reality we face. 1 in 6 Canadians who menstruate have experienced period poverty, and nearly 1 in 3 people who menstruate under the age of 25 in Canada struggle to afford period products. The situation is even more dire for marginalized communities, with Indigenous and rural menstruators facing costs that are often double or triple than those in urban areas. Mental health challenges are also at a devastating high. Youth suicide rates in Canada have been rising, with mental issues like anxiety, depression, and self-harm affecting young people in provinces all over Canada. Over 3 million Canadian youth aged 12 to 24 are estimated to experience mental health struggles each year, and only 1 in 5 young people receive the mental health care they need. Behind every statistic is a person, someone forced to choose between healthcare and basic needs, someone waiting months for mental health support or navigating stigma and silence. These challenges demand real solutions. That is why we are calling for a nationwide policy ensuring free menstrual products in schools and public spaces, alongside comprehensive, gender-inclusive, reproductive health education. No young person should have to struggle for basic dignity and care. Similarly, we need universal, accessible mental health services, youth-centered addiction support, and investment in mentorship programs and conflict resolution training to address the root cause of youth violence. Let's be clear. Menstrual and reproductive health is a right. Mental health support is a right. We must ensure that no young person in Canada is left behind due to financial, systemic, or social barriers. We must create systems that uplift young people, not just when they are a crisis, but long before. Whether it is expanding the Menstrual Equity Fund to support low-income communities or implement further mental health support, the time to act is now. We need leaders who will champion these causes. We need action that reflects our values of equity, dignity, and justice. Today, let's commit, not just in words, but in action, to build a future where every young person has the support, care, and opportunities they deserve. Thank you, and I'll now pass it on to my colleague, Santiago.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle... Excusez-moi. Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Santiago Proto Sanchez, j'ai 17 ans, puis j'étudie au Collège Lévis, puis je suis bien sûr honoré d'être ici aujourd'hui. Pour commencer avec des statistiques, nous observons une augmentation de 72% des crimes haineux depuis 2019 contre les femmes, les personnes de LGBTQIA+, et d'autres groupes religieux et ethniques. D'ailleurs, 44% des femmes et de divers genres âgés entre 16 ans et 30 ans sont visées par des discours haineux. Finalement, 88% des Canadiens pensent que nous devons rendre les espaces en ligne plus sûrs. Sur ce, notre première recommandation porte sur l'engagement des jeunes dans le dialogue. Depuis 2019, la propagation de narratifs qui divisent et qui met en péril notre démocratie a drastiquement augmenté, confirment des recherches réalisées par the Canadian Government Communication Security Establishment CSE. Nous devons disserter avec ces gens plus radicaux et ceux venant des communautés en ligne plus extrêmes dans le but d'avoir une société plus inclusive. Ensuite, nous devons mener un combat contre la désinformation sur les réseaux sociaux Il est malheureusement difficile de connaître les sources de désinformation qui viennent tant toucher nos jeunes. C'est pour cela que nous encourageons la création de communautés et de mécanismes pour vérifier l'information. Nous devons mener ce combat pour réduire la polarisation, protéger notre démocratie et éviter la création d'extrêmes qui pourraient malmener notre stabilité sociale et briser la confiance avec nos institutions. C'est pour cela que les jeunes Québécois pensent que nous devons implémenter de nouvelles lois pour mieux réguler ce monde qui est encore nouveau. Les jeunes Québécois veulent aussi revoir nos lois en matière de langue française. Leur argument, favoriser le bilinguisme au Québec. Au lieu d'imposer des lois rigides, de plus, davantage d'efforts devraient être mis pour nos nouveaux arrivants qui, eux, ont besoin de support pour apprendre cette langue qui est assez difficile. Malheureusement, la jeunesse québécoise se sent politiquement et culturellement exclue, tandis que les minorités au Québec se sentent discriminées par ces lois imposantes. En favorisant le bilinguisme, les barrières linguistiques seront réduites, en plus d'améliorer la compétitivité du Québec dans le monde des affaires. Finalement, nous devons investir davantage en éducation afin de réduire ces barrières linguistiques et cette polarisation de la société. Les écoles devraient prioriser l'apprentissage de l'esprit critique, l'éducation des médias et, bien sûr, le français, pour avoir une nation mieux informée et plus inclusive encore. En plus, de prévenir la radicalisation et d'équiper les jeunes avec de meilleurs outils pour naviguer dans ce monde. Avec de telles recommandations, nous sommes en mesure d'avoir une province largement meilleure qu'aujourd'hui. Je passerai maintenant la parole à mon collègue Jaden.
Merci beaucoup, Santiago. I'm now pleased to open up to questions, but I first must show you a physical copy of this absolutely magnificent hard work that young Canadians from across the country have put in. Please open it up to questions.
Yeah, I'm interested in knowing your views about the policies that have been pitched by party leaders in their campaigns so far. You've talked about climate challenges, and one of the key things, a few actually, of the key things that's being discussed currently, is building more pipelines and more infrastructure projects and pushing for more oil production, for example. What are your views on that, and policies that suggest that we should get rid of the carbon tax completely, like even the industrial side of it? Do you see that these policies reflect what the young people want?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think to address your first question when it comes to priorities and sustainability and pipelines, we look at a lot of party leaders who are trying to manage what's going on. We've got simultaneously, while Indigenous clean water is a major dilemma for many Canadians, we have an economy that needs to be addressed. What is the solution? And by no means are young people necessarily calling on the government to end oil production or to end pipelines. It's a matter of making sure there's mutual respect amongst the communities that we're conducting those operations in, and that there's a really strong amount of regulatory practices and innovation that goes into the same amount that we're emitting. When it comes to our economy and fueling our economy, Canada still needs oil and gas to survive, and that's how it is. But that doesn't mean that we cannot take some of the resources that we're putting forward into non-renewables and consider how we can innovate, create energy in a green and sustainable practice. Absolutely. I think on the carbon tax, it's become such a point of polarization in Canada. I think I mentioned this in my speech. Polarization is not a Canadian value. That's not something we do here. And I think, unfortunately, from Americanization and some unfortunate influences, it's become something that's happened in the House of Commons. That's not the value of Canada. That's not the value of the future. We need to work together to find solutions to climate change. That's the bottom line. So while the carbon tax might not be sufficient in order to make that change and keep citizens with checks in their pockets and with groceries, affordability, and housing, it was a solution. Now, is it being enacted? No, and we need to find other solutions, because if the citizens cannot continue with it, then we have to figure out a new solution to deal with it.
What do you think of the different parties' approach so far when it comes to trying to reach young Canadians? Like, we're seeing some try and do perhaps more social media or work with influencers. I'm curious what stands out as things that are working, where you feel like the parties are actively trying to reach young people, speak to them, and what's not? Where do you see that there's a gap?
I appreciate the question. I think, you're absolutely right. It's definitely a strategy to try to reach young people. And I think I'm glad, regardless, that politicians are trying to reach out. I caution politicians to be very careful about what they say, and then if they do end up getting elected in their ridings, what they actually carry through in doing. Making sure you're meeting the promises that you're promising and not necessarily living up to. But I think finding new strategies to reach young people, especially if it's coming from a creditable source, like a local electoral district association or a party leader, is a really strong way to motivate young people to show up to the polls. I think it is fair game for candidates to use these different tactics in order to try to get young people to participate democratically. That's why we have these mediums, virtually, in person, social media, etc. And I think if you can reach a new generation in a new, nuanced and innovative capacity, that is absolutely incredible.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci, c'est ce qui conclut la conférence de presse.
Thank you very much.